Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory.
We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. If you desire to integrate this learning practically and supportively into your life, then Soul-Driven Motherhood is your space to go deeper. Head on over to nourishingthemother.com.au or follow any of the links on our socials for Soul-Driven Motherhood.
We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we're so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today, as part of our body love exploration and series, we have the divine Charmaine Newmark, who is a naturopath. She calls herself the Nourished Naturopath, and it is our hope and desire that you feel deeply nourished and reconnected to your body. Her expertise as she traverses her own pregnancy, her third-time pregnancy, is at the moment that she's taking women through those stages of life as well. So we're going to be talking about juicy things like support and detox during pregnancy, what it looks like to come back into the body and support pregnancy, birth and postpartum, mental health in motherhood, and also a particular interest topic for Bridgie and I is supporting women through binge eating and sweet eating, and what does it look like, what is going on, and how can we support and help ourselves. So super juicy stuff. We hope that you are as excited as we are. Before I do that, I would love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email address, and once every so often we send you links to everything that's going on in the world, and you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
So Charmaine Newmark is a holistic naturopath in the healing countryside of Camden, New South Wales. Passionate about working with women and mothers who feel imbalanced within their mind, body and spirit, Charmaine calls upon the traditional wisdom of our body and planet to ignite our innate and empowered healing pathway. So welcome, Charmaine. It's so beautiful to have you here.
Thank you so much. What a privilege. I've been grinning from ear to ear all day.
It is absolutely our honour. So where we would love to begin is wherever you would love to begin, where feels most honouring for you to take women on the journey of loving their body.
Yeah, I guess where I begin with a lot of clients is just taking it back to, I will always share my story. I'll always come from a space of vulnerability that's a very high value of mine, just so I can, I guess, take down this barrier that myself as a practitioner has all my shiz together and has everything sorted and has all my ducks in a row and eats really well and has this totally zen lifestyle, because I know that can be a lot of the perception. I just really want to bring that pedestal down a little bit. So if that's cool with you guys, I'll share a little bit of how this all started, because I guess it's been building over time and time to get to this point where over the past 5 years, I'm like, this is it. I get it. This all was starting to make sense. Because at 5 years old, I was told that my mum had 5 years left to live, and she had a terminal illness. And I went straight into survival mode. I would clean the house for her. I would close her door while she was sleeping. I would keep the siblings quiet. I would do whatever I can to try and help her feel better, because I just wanted to fix my mum. We've got a really beautiful, close relationship. And I was terrified as a 5-year-old to hear that. So fast forward to however old I am now, mid-30s something, she's still with us. And the one thing that I've held throughout my life has been this just immense hope that irrespective of all of the things that had been thrown at us, there had always been just this knowing within me that it would all be okay. And I know one day the time is going to come, as it does for everyone, but there's just that deep knowing within me that if I was to open up the windows and let the sun shine in and cook a beautiful meal and allow her body to not feel so stressed and to just love on her and adore her body, that the possibility for healing was there. So I felt that for a long time. And then towards the end of primary school, I began to notice that I had a very interesting relationship with the earth. So in year 6, we would sit at lunchtime, me and my 3 friends, and I'd created a witchcraft circle because I'd watched this movie and they did witchcraft and they were summoning the elements. I'm like, this is really cool. Let's do this thing. And I can vividly remember sitting on the side of the oval and we were summoning the elements, and I felt like I was the wind that I was calling upon. And I looked upon the grass, and the grass was talking back to me, but not from a space of words. It was an energetic communication that we were in. And I think looking back then, that was just another piece of the puzzle that I was like, okay, there's some real wisdom here. Fast forward through teenage years when I went off the rails and did all the wild, crazy party stuff and rebelled against life, and started a career in corporate management. And my desire was to be a hospitality manager, whatever that means. So my 16-year-old self wanted to be a hospitality manager. I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to have children. I wanted high heels. I wanted blazers. I wanted penthouse. I wanted all of the glitz and glam and success and the good money and the partying and all of those things. And then I kind of got there and had a very severe nervous breakdown. So after a long time of being disconnected from that year 6 me that could talk to grass and felt part of the wind, fast forward 20 years of not having that, I very clearly got the message that I had fallen out of alignment with myself. And I'd fallen out of alignment with my truth. And the journey from there, that was 7 years ago, the journey from there has really just been returning to home and returning to truth and returning to that innate wisdom that I used to have within me. That has always still been there, but was just a little bit silenced to please everyone else because it was a little bit woo. And yeah, so I just lost track a little bit there.
How did you fit in naturopathy degree in that?
Amongst the breakdown stuff?
Yeah, were you already doing the corporate thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing the corporate thing. So I would catch the train to work and I would lug, that was back in the day where we'd have big textbooks and lugging things around, and I would lug that and I would study on the train. I would study when we get home. And I'm typical type A, can't sit still, love to be busy. Well, that's how I was back then. It's quite the opposite these days. And I would stay back after work. So I'd kind of like 6, 7 o'clock finish and wrap up my corporate team. I'd say goodbye to all of them. I was managing a team of 35 women. So it was a really interesting playground for me to learn quite a lot about women there. But as they would go, then I would secretly whip out my textbooks and use the internet. And yeah, there we were. It took me 7 years to finish college. It was only supposed to be 4. It took me 7, but we made it.
It's really amazing. I really want to commend you on that because that's a huge commitment.
What called you back to that? Because it's interesting, you made a couple of comments. It was obviously quite intuitive for you as a 5-year-old to have this sense, or even as a young girl, to have this sense of the healing power of food, and that you had that real opening when you were in grade 6. Was something whispering to you that led you on the path to study naturopathy, even though those worlds kind of collided with your, your kind of high-flying world?
Yeah, I guess so. When I was 18, I went to my first yoga class by chance and met my beautiful friend and yogi and mentor, who is still my beautiful friend and yogi and mentor 14 years later. And there was that remembrance in my body, like, oh, yeah. And I remember the first time I was laying in Shavasana in one of her classes, and I was like, oh, this is it, far out. It's been a long time since I felt this. And that feeling never really left. And at 23, I nearly lost my mum in a pretty traumatic asthma attack. That took a long time for the paramedics to arrive, and it was just me, and all these things happened. And that kicked off my first experience with anxiety. And I went to the pharmacist, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I can't breathe, and I feel all these things. And he's like, yeah, try this at St. John's Wort. I was like, oh, St. John's Wort. And it was instantly, like, once I held that bottle in my hand, it felt like medicine to me. So irrespective of the studies, I could feel the energy of that. And throughout that time, so that was about 3 weeks that I felt quite anxious, that I used the St. John's Wort. I slept better. I stopped taking my Duramine that I was taking to lose weight, stopped drinking so much coffee because it would make my heart race, and just started drinking more water, just simple stuff, and going back to yoga. So I was kind of reminded of it then. And from there, it just kind of grew. And then, however old I was when I decided to go and check out college, I thought naturopathy would be really different to what it was. But there I was, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So, yeah, it was just sort of this breadcrumb after breadcrumb of guiding me back to where I am now.
And so you're pregnant with your third?
Yeah.
How was your experience of babies 1 and 2 and 3?
Oh, my goodness. How vastly different all 3 of them are. So my eldest is 8. So my eldest was born when I was studying and I was doing the corporate thing. And I was just newly married and we were just newly out of home. And I was very disconnected from my body, like really disconnected from my body. I had a very disassociated pregnancy, really looking back. And being the first one of my friends and the first one of my family to have a baby, there wasn't really a lot of conversation about the adornment of pregnancy and how amazing it is and what happens in our bodies and natural progressions of birth and labor and all of those things. So I had a fairly healthy pregnancy, and apart from not really feeling much of it, and then a fairly long, drawn-out birth, and then was blessed with this beautiful firecracker of a spirit. So she's a very fiery person and has been from the moment she was born. But she had a lot of digestive issues, and I was very much so in that, what's the dynamic, like the victim, the rescue kind of mentality. Like I'd really clung to the fact that I needed to fix her because it had become so fulfilling for me, because I kind of had patterned played that my whole life. So I got really lost in needing to fix her and to fix her issues, and completely lost myself in that. And really, by the time I had my nervous breakdown, she was two-ish. So it didn't last that long until my body was like, nah. And amongst that, started a business as well and went back to corporate work. So very, very quickly, I was told that that was not working for me. And I kind of explained my breakdown, like I felt like I had just fallen onto the floor in a million different pieces, and the journey from there has been piecing everything together. So the decision then to have my second was freaky as for me. I was just so scared that I was going to go backwards to where I was, go back into that place where it was a really dark hole to be in at the time, and it felt like it would never end. So I actually spent a lot of my second pregnancy really anxious, and everyone kept like applauding me that I hadn't been putting on much pregnancy weight. I'm like, yeah, thanks, that's awesome. I just can't eat anything because I'm so anxious about having this baby and losing the plot. So there was a lot of fear around that. So I spent my third trimester, I ate really clean in my pregnancy because I just wanted to give myself as much nourishment as I could. I took all my supplements, I took all my herbs, I saw my naturopaths and my chiros and did all the things to try and fix my broken self, which felt like at the time. And then I had just the most cruisiest little baby. And, you know, a very cruisy pregnancy, cruisy birth. Like he walked out, he birthed himself. There was no resistance from me in that moment. And then after he was born, he just slept on my chest for 6 hours. And from then has just been the most cruisy little kid. So he's been a really healing experience for me. Because it's like I went into second second time motherhood, just fearing the absolute worst, and I was showing the absolute opposite. So now fast forward to number 3, and I'm just excited. Like, I just feel so excited to, one, be connected to my body, and 2, have this incredible body of wisdom that I have, and the most beautiful community. Like, I just pinch myself at the community that I have in my local community and my online community. Like, it's just delicious. And yeah, to really be at a stage now where I'm fully trusting and honoring my body and what it's going through, instead of being from a place of fear, or with my first being from a place of disconnection. So it's a totally different experience.
I was interested in that. How would you describe your relationship with your body in pregnancy and birth 1, 2, and now?
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. So my relationship with my body, baby number 1 was looking in the mirror and just being disgusted, to be honest. I couldn't connect with how beautiful this situation was, because all I could see was the fatness, and I'd spent my whole life trying to not be fat.
Can I ask you while we're there, is that all right if I interrupt you?
Yeah, go for it.
So you now, being essentially the panacea to who she needed back then, what would you go back in time and wish to, install in her brain or mentor her through?
Big question, because I can feel that within myself, that I'm mothering that version of myself still. I still meet those edges of myself. I met that edge of myself today, and I mothered myself through it and through the pain that I had experienced in that first pregnancy. But I guess what I would love her to know is just like to be pregnant, to be here, to be breathing, to be innately beating a heart and breathing without us even needing to try is nothing short of a miracle, right? Like, it almost brings me to tears to think of. And what I would do to gift that to that version of myself,
What didn't she know or wasn't in connection with, do you think?
I think what she didn't know was that how to feel in her body, because I had, through a lifetime of survival and protection, shut down feelings to the point where I don't remember what it felt like to feel my baby kick for the first time, and what it felt like to have my first period, or what it felt like to have my first orgasm. I don't remember much sensation within my body. And I think I explain to my clients a lot, it's like we chop off at the neck and we just live in here because it's a lot safer, right? But we're missing this whole body of incredible wisdom. And what I would love for her to know is that it is actually safe to feel, or even to know that I wasn't feeling for such a long time. I don't think it even dawned on me only until recently. I think, like, really, it's probably only been in the last 5 years where I'm like, oh, you're supposed to feel things in your body? Oh, okay. All I could feel was numb or anxiety. There was no other feeling, unless I was out and I was drunk and I was dancing and I was elated and I was addicted to that feeling. Absolutely addicted. Because that's the only time I felt anything other, Did that answer that question?
I think so. What changed then between, well, I guess we just move on to, what was your experience in your body like with your second?
What was that? Sorry, I just had someone look at the job.
What was your experience in your body of your second?
Experience of my body felt, to look back, it kind of feels like it was quite a traumatic time of my life. I felt like I was really in survival mode the whole time. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of panic. The anxiety was pretty crippling, although I was back to work at that stage, so I had this really great poker face on. But yeah, my next door neighbour every time I'm on a live. She wants to come over and play with my daughter. Yeah, so it really, when I look back, I just see a whole lot of anxiety. And for a long time, I really grieved that. But I can also look upon it now and see that it really was, once I gave birth to that second baby, it was the beginning of my biggest transformation and my biggest awakening. So it's almost like I had to get to that point where all of a sudden it was no longer just about me. And I had to force myself out of the comfort zone of anxiety to heal for me and to heal for him too.
Yeah. So something happened in your birth for you to say he walked out.
Yeah.
Because that's not the birth of someone who's caught in the trauma of anxiety.
Yes. So the experience of my birth, so I was with my first, I lost a lot of blood, I hemorrhaged, and I had to go through all this stuff after birth. So I was very fixated on getting to the hospital. So I was in labor and my contractions were getting really close together. And I was like, okay, it's time to wake up, Charlie, and we need to go to the hospital. I was 2 minutes apart. And I had this urge to push, which I'd not experienced with my first. I didn't experience the urge to push with my first. I just, I was given a hormone that helped me push. But then come the second time around, I had this urge to push and I was like, what is going on? So I grabbed my husband, I grabbed my daughter and I brought them into the room and I'm like, we need to call the midwives because I think we're going to have a baby. I called the midwives and she was able to talk me through a contraction of not needing to push. So I was like, okay, I was pushing for 4 hours with my first. This is my first urge to push. We should be okay. We're 10 minutes from the hospital. I'm just going to get into the car and we're going to get to the hospital. And then we're driving along the highway and I'm having the contractions and I knew that it wasn't going to take much longer. And I was panicking and I had my daughter in the back and she's like, are you okay, mummy? My husband's like white as a ghost and he's driving along and he's sweating. He's like, just hold it in, just hold it in. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. This baby's absolutely coming. And I said to him at one stage, I think I realized that it was happening and I was still 10 minutes away from the hospital. So at that stage, I just said to him, how long have women been birthing for? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how long have we been around for? He's like, I don't know, like 100,000 years. And I just had this like image of I can't even fathom the amount of women before me birthing. And I went, okay, we're okay. And 2 contractions later, he was out.
Oh my God.
In the car?
In the car, yeah.
Did you pull over? How did that work?
No. So at first I felt his head coming. I felt him crown and so I yelled at my husband, I'm like, he just crowned. And he's like, hold it in. I'm like, yeah, no. You absolutely can't help that. Yeah, so he's crowning. I'm realizing this is absolutely happening. And I had no choice about it. There was no way I could control it. There was no way my husband could control it. And there was no way I was going to make it to the hospital. So there was this complete opening and surrender in my body.
What did
the next contraction hit? It was actually probably the most blissful moment of my life. Because I guess it's only really just come into my awareness that would have been the first time that I really truly surrendered, you know. So it was a beautiful experience because there was no resistance. There was no trying to make it look like anything. There was no trying to make it fit into a box or please anyone. It was just my body, my baby, and I had to just take a seat back. And what it felt like at the time, so I was in the front seat, my daughter's in the back. I could feel her energy there, but I can't remember what she was saying. My husband's screaming down the highway. He's high beaming the people because there was roadworks. It was the middle of the night. And I felt him crown. I felt his head come out. And all the time I was watching myself from up in the corner, like where the mirror is, like looking upon myself. So it was a complete out of body experience. But there was something really innate within that. There was something that just felt like I wasn't there trying to figure out how to do that. you know. It just happened on its own because I let go of that. And
let go of the mental chatter, you mean?
Yeah, because I didn't have a choice to mental chatter about it. It wasn't doing anything. The mental chatter was not changing the situation. And once I realized, and there was this sovereignty for the experience of birth and how long that we've been birthing for, it was like, oh, I got this. And I felt just really held in that moment. So yeah, Artie's little head came and the cord.
You're still driving. You're still driving at this point, and
yeah, still driving. So we were 3 minutes from the hospital when he came out completely. And there was definitely, I think that my husband I'm more of a freezer. He's more of a flasher. So he was flashing to the hospital.
So you're sitting there in the passenger seat with this tiny baby on your chest.
Yeah. So firstly, though, as we're driving, so firstly, the cord was wrapped twice around his neck. So without me even needing to think about it again, for somehow I just knew the cord was wrapped, and I can remember unwrapping it and I put him up on my tummy.
It's like primal. That's like the millennia of women before you.
Really? Yeah.
Honestly. Like, to talk about body love after that experience, like I can't even put words to the experience that did for me and my body, because I was like a warrior woman walking into the hospital. I was like, look at me and my baby, yeah.
So good. Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah, it was magic. It was really magic. So my husband, we get like do around the roundabout at the front of the hospital, and he's like, the car goes up on the gutter, and he runs into emergency and no one's there. And then he goes, the little lady comes out with her cup of tea, and he's like, my wife just had a baby. And she goes, oh, congratulations. No, in the car. Oh. And she starts running out. Then wheelchairs are coming and doctors are coming. And it felt like a movie. It was the most surreal thing. And I was just here in this little bliss bubble. And this teeny tiny little baby on my tummy just going, far out. Did that just happen?
I can't help but marvel at just the genius orchestration that is too, right? So if we imagine that birth is one of the greatest rites of passage that a woman and her psyche can go through, and that, as I see it, it's literally a gateway that women step through and ultimately become someone else on the other side of. And every baby co-creates with the mother the experience hormonally, energetically, epigenetically, that sets up their nervous system and their entry into their human form the moment the soul really intercedes into the body. But this whole moment has such a divine orchestration to it that I can't help but marvel at the gift of what you're telling us with this birth, which is a very clear, almost line in the sand between how you've been up until this point in time and how you will be forever changed. And that opening and that surrender and that connection to all of the women who have come before you was part of his gift as he came through. Like, it's amazing.
So magic, right? Like, how swoony is that?
Super, yeah.
And talk about landing you in your body, like for a woman who was quite disconnected and numb, to have such empowering and deeply embodied experience. I mean, you can never go back to your earlier consciousness now. Like that is just pivotal.
Yeah, so pivotal. Hence why I'm excited for birth of number 3. Like, I was talking to my midwife, and like we were just doing, and she's a doula and a midwife, and she was kind of asking my questions about how I'm emotional. I could see that she was sort of sensing how I'm emotionally feeling about the birth. I'm like, I'm totally fine. Like, I'm really excited. I really got this. I just need you to like do the bells and whistles bit. Well, actually, I probably don't. But if you could just be there to help my husband, that would be great. Yeah. But I just feel excited about it because I've moved through so many edges and just had them absolutely cracked open. That now it's just excited to get to meet my baby. So it's a beautiful experience. I feel very blessed that for a long time I resisted baby number 3 until we had, what felt like an early miscarriage, and it was a very clear, like, you're not done yet. So I'm very grateful that we've made the decision to have number 3, because I feel like I get to really enjoy this experience now after what I've been through in the past. So it's exciting.
And how do you feel about your body this time round?
Yeah, I have absolute like adornment and reverence, but I'm also met still with those pain points that I'm still working through.
Which makes you a perfect teacher, right? Because what we're teaching, we're also always going to be learning. That's what creates mastery.
Absolutely. And I know, like, I can see it. I chuckle at myself when I'm in the thick of processing something, just going, because I know now without fail that everything I transverse on the other side of that, they'll be there with like my microphone yelling it to the people, you know. You know, so I can see the absolute magic in that. And that's why I use the word alchemy, because it feels like I'm taking that rock and I'm turning it into the liquid gold. Yeah, it feels really purposeful, and I can really hold that hope for any challenges that are coming up for any woman that comes into my office, room, space, because I can see that it's going to be part of their greatest awakening.
What advice do you have for women who are seeking to love their body more, particularly at the time of pregnancy where it's in the greatest amount of change? And I would add into that I witness women struggle the most because they're really out of control of their body.
Yeah.
It's the first time someone else is taking the lead on what's happening here. And that creates a huge amount of discomfort. So what advice do you have for women struggling with their body as it changes during pregnancy?
Yeah, I think from my perspective and what I'm coming back to in my 3rd pregnancy is just taking away a lot of the shame and social constructions on how it should look. And really coming back to what feels beautiful and what feels good in your body. Because doing more of that is going to be the medicine you need to heal the broken heart, right? If we're living a life and expecting our bodies to look how the ads look, and you know that we can only put on a certain amount of weight that the doctor tells us that we can put on, we're just never going to feel like we're measuring up. But if we're looking at our body from a perspective of it is doing enough, the fact that it is simply creating this magic without us even needing to try, it's already doing it on its own accord, and just shifting the lens from being not enough and not beautiful enough, not skinny enough, not healthy enough, and taking it from a lens to really marvel the experience that we're going through. It's an instant energy shift in my body. And the more we can do that, the more we can break those patterns. But I think what I see a lot is feelings of shame around choices that we make in pregnancy, particularly around our food. And there's just so much conversation, especially on the other side. I work a lot in postnatal depletion and postnatal burnout, and those women just shaming how they ate too much Maccas, or they drank too much red soft drink, and there's just so much shame around it. And I really like to shift that conversation and really dive into emotions and eating and all of those beautiful things. So there's just a different relationship with body and different relationship with food and the ways that we comfort our body. And there's no right or wrong. It's just about coming back to what feels good for our body and what doesn't.
Are you able to just do I know that it's a huge topic in and of itself, but your postnatal burnout and depletion, what would you say are no more than 3, but 1 to 3 pillars that you would love every woman to know about their postnatal period, when I perceive that the vast majority of us are in inverted commas danger of entering depletion, exhaustion, and it's largely unseen?
Yeah, it is largely unseen. Look, I have a massive perception bias on that because of the work that I do. Like, I'm walking around almost assuming that most women are walking around with some form of postnatal depletion and exhaustion. I unfortunately don't know any women who are thriving postnatally and feeling really good and juicy about their body. But yeah, I guess the 3 pillars that I would, if I could speak to a crowd of people in that postnatal period, is just to look upon that postnatal period from a space of investment in your future. And we talk a lot about investing in the future generation, but we don't talk a lot about investment of the future mother. Like if your postnatal experience is delicious and comfortable and a bonding, heart-opening experience for you, like what lens does that set for the rest of your mothering experience, as opposed to being one where you're depleted and exhausted and you're eating scraps of toast for breakfast and you're just wishing it would hurry up? What tone does that set for the rest of your motherhood? So I really look upon that postnatal phase as an investment into the future of our body, but also investment into the future of our mothering journey and the impact that can have. So how can we, and I think once I say that to most women, they're like, oh yeah, it's not just about the baby's health. Like we get to enjoy this experience too.
How much do you see that the fact that women can't recognize that or need your prompting, how much of that is an expression of our broader culture's like lack of value of the mother and her mothering?
Once the baby's on the other side of her.
What was that, sorry, Jules?
Once the baby's on the other side of her, right? We're all about her while the baby's inside of her. And then the baby comes out and we're like, oh.
You're good now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do think it's a social construct, and one that, again, possibly perception bias, but I feel like is starting to shift because we are innately designed to make babies, have babies, feed babies, and we're also innately designed to heal our body. Like we have the capacity to heal without supplements and transfusions and physios and all of those things that we're told we need. We actually have the ability within us to recover from childbirth. But it's a 3-year process. It's not a 12 or what's the fourth? Yeah, a 12-week process. So unfortunately, I do think it's largely a social construct. Again, and as we know, the work about wanting our mothers back in the workforce and contributing to society and all of those kind of things, it's a shame, it's a travesty, but I think it is changing. And what I would love the message to be to women is that this healing and moving through childbirth and early childhood is an innate wisdom within you. It's not outside of you that orchestrates that. We just need to kind of take some of the nonsense out of it and some of the noise out of that conversation and just come back to you and your baby and what feels good for you and your body. It can be really simple, but we've made it really complicated, you know? Yeah.
I'm trying to think about which way I want to take this conversation. Let's talk about, there was something you dropped when I was talking to you once and you were like, yeah, I'm coming back from this trip and I'm going to do a pregnancy detox. And my ears automatically went ping, because as a classically trained naturopath, that's like taboo. It's like you do not detox when you're creating a baby, because you don't want toxins flying around that end up creating a baby. So I'm fascinated. Please tell me more.
Yeah, I guess detox, I go so much against the grain when I talk about detoxing as a woman's body, because naturopathically, when I say detox, people would be like, okay, so green smoothies, lemon juice waters, no coffee, no carbs, no sugars, and all of those kind of things. But for me, I went away for 6 weeks and we traveled around in our caravan, and I stepped out of my normal consciousness and into a really different paradigm, which is a conversation for another day, but completely ate differently than what I would normally eat, and didn't think twice about my relationship with food. So as I was coming back and I could feel this heaviness in my body, I'm like, this feels a little bit funky, because I know that I haven't been eating and nourishing my body in a way that feels really good for me. So I'm going to come back and, I'm going to do a little bit of a detox. And detox for me is like, how do we just let go of the shit? Like there is so much being fed at me. Like I was at the oyster farm in South Australia and they're like, oh, you can't have this if you're pregnant. And I'm like, there's so much conversation and so much noise around what you can and you can't have. So for me, the detox is, how do I just let go of the labels, let go of the crap, let go of the not just the shit within the psyche of food and conversation around pregnancy, but also we're being fed so much chemicals and so much pesticides. And then like the the supplements are filled with all of this stuff. So it's just was my way of explaining what I want to do is bring my body back to baseline, because I have a very good knowing of what it feels like in my body when my whole body is aligned and my body sings, and I call it elevate. So I run a program called Elevate because it feels like I'm elevating my body. And I know what that feels like. So that requires me to let go of the places where I've stuffed down my emotions, or I've eaten to comfort when I know that I could have chosen to have a bath and that would have felt like a better experience, or when I've eaten stuff that really isn't nourishing my body, but is nourishing my taste buds. But yeah, it's just stripping back all of this stuff and going back to this really simple way of eating, but also returning us back to how I feel. This is a visual experience, so it's a little bit hard for me to explain, but I have a lot of visual downloads come through on how I imagine it would have looked for us as hunter-gatherer women back in the day before any of this stuff existed, of how we would have fueled and nourished our body. So I can see very clear images of what that would look like. So that feels like a truth in my body. So that's how I eat and how I like to eat, because I look at the relationship that we have with food as a very intimate one. It is one that largely is ignored, but yet food is something that keeps us alive. Without it, we would die. So if we have a distorted and a fragmented relationship with food, and we're shoving it all down, and we're not feeling it, and we're not tasting it, and we're skipping it, and we're fasting it, and we're dying it away, and then we're binging it, I can't help but see that as a reflection for the relationship that we have with life itself. So it's a profound one to really, for me, to spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think about food, and I think about my relationship with food quite a lot.
I really love that reflection.
Yeah, it feels really powerful for me. And when it kind of first landed in my body, I was like, whoa, that feels really big. Like, come on. But then the more I experience it and the more I talk about it, and there's just so many layers to it that it just makes so much sense that it's proportional and relational to our relationship with life. If we're not connected to it, how disconnected are we, you know?
And that really leads to a question we had really around how, you know, because there's a lot of characterization of women reaching for chocolate or sweetness or the ice cream to drown their feelings or the chips or, you know, something to satiate feelings and emotions, and comfort eating, essentially. And, you know, we're not in the place of shaming that at all, but really uncovering what that is and how, if we understood what's beneath that, which is really what it sounds like you're suggesting, how we then do that in a more conscious way that doesn't demonize food, but improves our relationship with it.
Yeah. God, it's such a huge topic. So my Elevate program is a 4-week topic, but I'm going to 4-week program, but I'm going to expand it out to at least 3 months because it's so big and so many layers to it. But really, the first place where I always start with our relationship with food is about finding the compassion as opposed to finding the shame. Because again, I think there's so much shame around it from a societal perspective. And the conversation about chocolate, I think, is just a patriarchal thing, to be honest, because they knew that it opened up our hearts. So there's a lot of shame about it. And that is the first place that I start is like and I'll always share the experience, like if my baby's crying and I've tried all of the things and I don't know what's going to work, I'm going to pick him up and I'm going to comfort him at the breast. And there's no one shaming me for that. But yet as an adult, if we're like, I don't know what's going on, my energy's peaking and pinging, and I don't even know the next step forward, and I'm reaching for a chocolate bar and everyone's like, oh, you shouldn't comfort eat, like, oh, you're going to get so fat. And I'm just like, well, can we just take the shame out of that? Because we only can do the best that we can do. And if that's what we know, that's how I was brought up. Oh, you've had a hard day. Let's go get some hot chips. Like, so largely our society was brought up doing that, but yet it's still a behavior that is so shamed. And it's it's quite heartbreaking to see what that has done to our relationship with food and our relationship with body. But that's definitely the first place I start with, is just going, how can we have compassion that, yeah, it's been a hard day and so far you've made this choice. The next level that I go into is, well, is that choice serving you or not? Because I could eat chocolate and it's going to make my tummy bloat and it's going to make me feel a little bit achy. You could eat chocolate and it's going to make your heart open and it's going to make you want to go and make love to your husband and it's going to be medicine for you, but it might not be medicine for me. So I'm really wanting to take that woman into what it feels like in her body when she's eating something that is in alignment with her truth and in alignment with her, because that will be medicine, irrespective of what they tell you on the health star ratings and things like that. Yeah, so I just lost my train of thought. Chocolate.
We were just talking about comfort eating and how you viewed that, or how you could start the conversation with women to view their comfort eating differently, and what alternatives or starting places you had for them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's the next stage I take them through, is feeling what feels good in my body. So what does it feel like to eat certain foods and the vibration that I'm feeling after certain foods? So I explain it like every time we eat something, we choose to adorn this amazing temple that we have, or we choose to numb out. We choose to comfort. And there's nothing wrong with either or of those experiences. So we're going to drop the shame about either or of the behavior. There are many times where I choose food that I'm like, that wasn't a beautiful food for my body, but I chose it. I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I made that decision, but I'm now making it from a conscious perspective, going, I know that food doesn't make my body feel good, but my taste buds want it. And in this moment, I'm choosing that consciously. I'm consciously choosing to suppress this emotion today, and I'm okay with that. There's also an element of suppressing elation. So there was a long time in my healing where I would start to feel really good and really expansive, and my energy was starting to get so big that I would go and binge eat to bring my energy back down, because I couldn't handle this energy coming through my body. And I knew hot chips, too much coffee, no water is going to bring that energy right back down. So when you can start to learn about what it feels like in your body and why you're making the choices that you make, you then get to choose. I explain it as you're either staying here or you're choosing to elevate. And you get to do that every time you choose to eat. So today I'm choosing to stay here. I'm choosing this level me, or I'm choosing the food that's going to take me and step me into the body that is in alignment with where my energy is. If my energy is up here and it's beautiful and it's peaking, and my body's down here and I'm dragging it along, there's, disconnection. I want to bring that back into alignment. That's going to be different for every woman. And I think that's probably one of the main things that I love to talk to people about, because they will assume a detox means we're going to take all these things out of the diet. And I'm like, actually, we're going to just listen to how your body feels and what is medicine for you and what's not. And when you're making those choices that don't make you feel good, well, let's unpack why you're making those choices, and do you want to keep making them?
What are alternative comfort foods, just in terms of, I totally love what you're saying on a psycho-emotional level, but on also just a practical level, I'm like, God, my go-to is normally my Cadbury dairy milk or my ice cream. What would be alternatives that are going to give me that same kind of sugar hit that would potentially be more healthful choices?
Yeah. So depending on which women you can take it a few different ways. So there's a lot of beautiful recipes when it comes to, let's talk about chocolate, because that's the biggest conversation with women. There is so much medicine in cacao. There's so much that it does on a biochemical level, on a neurotransmitter level, and then on an energetic level. Like, we know chocolate makes us feel good. Do we really want to take that away? No. But it is the cacao and the medicine of cacao that gives us that feeling, and it opens our heart, and that gives us that feeling. So I'm looking at the Cadbury and I'm like, does it even have cacao in there? I'm not really sure. But I'm going to eat it. It's going to taste good. It's going to feel good for a little while, but then I'm probably going to feel a little bit depleted. So you have a choice. You're not ready to give up your Cadbury yet. Then I'll be like, cool, how can we get a little bit less Cadburys, and how can we add on something that is really nourishing for your body? Like, can you have it with a fresh green juice? Can you have it with a side of nuts? Can you have it with a fruit platter? So you're having a little bit of variety and you're still getting that sweetness that you're looking for. Or we're great. Like, I'm really grateful that we live in the day and age where healthy food has become really cool and available and trendy. And we've got things like panna, and we've got things like Loving Earth chocolate, and we've got cacao that is made how cacao is supposed to be made, to be medicine instead of being processed stuff. So my favorite, I've got I'll share it in the Soul Driven group. Actually, it's a hot cacao recipe. And I made it when I was just needing something, but not wanting to reach for coffee, not wanting to reach for chocolate. And I've got half of my community well hooked on it.
You just read my mind, because I'm thinking I need a hot cacao recipe for winter.
Yeah. There's something about a hot drink, right? Especially when it's hot chocolate flavored. Yeah, so that's probably my go-to when I'm looking for that, and I'm looking for that experience, definitely.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you. Is there anything that feels left unsaid for you in the spectrum of what you would like women to know under the umbrella of body love as they're transitioning through a life phase where they're facing body change, potential depletion, and maybe even not recognizing this body that they have?
So I guess what we can always look upon is the lens in which we're observing our body, right? And every time that we shift and we change and we expand is an opportunity to love more of ourselves. So I could love me conditionally in pre-pregnant version of me, which was really comfortable in a size 12 and didn't have the hangover, and the jeans were really comfortable and I didn't have the little thing under my chin. But if I'm setting conditional love upon myself and only loving myself in one version of how I look externally, then how am I also expanding that conditional love out into the world around me and only loving it in one color? So it is an absolute practice, and it is absolutely a still practice, working, you know what I mean, for me as well, to be able to look on my body changing and be able to love more of it and to be able to love wider, and turn it into that space of unconditional love, irrespective of how it should look. Because largely the perception that we have on how our body should look is really not our truth. And when we unpack it, what we find is we're actually quite comfortable in a certain way, but we're trying to make it look a certain way, you know?
Oh, it feels like medicine to my soul, actually, as you say that. So I feel like, thank you for that gift, because it feels really beautiful. I'm sure it will for our listeners too.
Thank you. I'm actually really glad you said that, Jules, because I think that is such a gift for women to experience. Like, I could tell you this, that, do this diet, drink this juice, take this supplement. If you're having it and you're like, oh God, this doesn't feel good for me, and your body's constricting, you're like, hell no, it's not going to be medicine for you. But if I tell you that your biochemistry is designed to move around sunrise and then move around sunset, and your body's like, oh God, that feels so good. Yeah, that's going to be the medicine that we need. And that's going to be, there's so much knowing in that in women's bodies. Like, we just know. And you know when they know too, because we're like,
it's just a shared resonance, isn't it?
Yeah, there really is.
I love your work. And I love how your work is really a reminder of, you know, the deconditioning that we all, you constantly need to do around our bodies and how we feel about our pregnancies and birth and our identities, right? Because we're bathing in cultures that kind of make a very, small box acceptable, and then if you're anything outside that, then it's, punish yourself till you get back in, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
what we would love to do is move into our 3 quick-fire questions that we ask every one of our podcast interviewees. Would that feel okay for you?
Yeah, beautiful.
So question number 1, and then Bridgie will take you off for question 2 and 3. Question number 1 that I have for you is, we love, as you've already shared, vulnerability and honesty and the courageousness that is women transforming, most especially a time in your life where you've experienced a wound or a void or something that's been really challenging for you, that you've, in hindsight, you can consequently see you've transformed into wisdom. And we're hoping there might be something you'd be willing to share about a time of deep challenge, what transformed, and the wisdom that has transpired.
Yeah. So there's been a few layers of that, but probably the most recent one would be the breakdown to breakthrough that I had 7 years ago. And that was an experience with very severe depression and very severe anxiety. So it got to a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. So it was at alarm bell stage for me and something I'd never experienced before. And which is interesting. I actually grew up in a family with a lot of mental health issues. And I always felt like there was a little bit weird. Like, can't you just feel better? Like, doesn't it just work like that? You can just go out dancing or something and feel better, right? Until I experienced the absolute depth of it. So that felt like my biggest awakening for me, because I had, at the time, it felt like I was clawing my way out of this dungeon. But that was my choice. I either decided to end it, but I had a daughter, and that's probably the reason why I did it, or I would claw my way out of the dungeon. So obviously that's what I did. And what I learned from that experience now has become one of my greatest superpowers, is how anxiety comes up in my body as soon as I'm out of alignment. So anytime that my psyche is feeling like that's not a truth for me, like I'll start to feel that come up in my body. Or if I'm sitting there and I'm speaking with a woman and I can feel her energy starting to shift, it presents in my body as anxiety. So it's no subtle little message. It's like a boom, 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 alarm bells, or drum beat, whichever way you want to look at it. So it's become a bit of a superpower to instantly go, okay, yeah, we're kind of going off course here. And it's very quick for me because it feels really uncomfortable. Like, anxiety, yuck, I can either avoid you, numb you, and sometimes I do. That's totally okay. Or I can go, okay, well, what is out of alignment? And once I can get back into my body and not listen to the head chatter, getting back into my body and actually hear the truth of it, bring it back into alignment, anxiety starts to dissipate. So it's become quite an alchemizing superpower, and one that I feel very blessed to have gone through. At the time, it didn't feel like a blessing. But now I can look back upon it and see it as just the most incredible body of wisdom that I now have absolute pleasure of guiding so many women through, because I know I'm speaking a different language when I'm talking about this level of healing. Yeah, it feels like a gift.
Beautiful. Now, if you could give a woman 1 or 2 books, only 1 or 2, that have changed her life, what would you recommend?
Eating by the Light of the Moon by Anita Johnston. Loved that book. So she talks a lot about relationship with food and spiritual hunger and hunger of the feminine, reconnection to body, reconnection to self. A beautiful turning point for me. And the second book, which I gift to most people, is Julie's book, Flowers and Honey, and our relationship and relationship with self.
Aww. That's beautiful. That's our first book recommendation from a guest with Flowers and Honey. And if you could have a billboard on a highway anywhere, what would it say?
I'm really good at over talking and overriding. I know that a lot, but I would try and encapsulate the energy that health is innately within you. So we have so much talk around you needing a supplement to be healthy, or a medication to be healthy, or you must eat this way to be healthy, or you must live this way to be healthy. And it's BS. We are health. Our body is health. Our energy is health innately. It is how we're designed and constructed. It's how we can cut our hand and heal without needing to do anything, because we're already designed to heal and to be health. So it's not outside of us. It is innately within us always. We just need to remove the obstacles.
That's super beautiful. So, Charmaine, we know that the week this podcast releases, you are also coming to Soul Driven Motherhood to do a deeper dive and an extended conversation. So we invite anyone who is not in Soul Driven Motherhood to jump in for what will be a really fabulous workshop with you. And you can find out more at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Instagram or Facebook. But we would really love for you to share, Charmaine, how people can connect with your work, where they can go further and where they find you.
Yeah, beautiful. So you can connect with me on socials at charmaine.newmark.nourished, or EcoMama on Facebook, because I can't figure out how to change it. Online at charmainenewmark.com. So I practice face-to-face here in Camden. I also practice online via Zoom. Thanks to COVID for kicking my butt into gear for organising that. I try and run at least a quarterly program. But at the moment, my focus really is nourishing my body for pregnancy. And by virtue, I'm having that conversation with the women I'm in contact with as well. So as we launch this, I'm running a 5-day free. It's called Mama Return. So it's about returning back into our body through the process of loving food, loving our relationship with food, and just returning back to the simplicity of it all and letting go of the noise and the chatter and really finding your truth. So that's a 5-day program that I'm going to be running online. And you can register for that via the link, or you can have a look at my website and register for that, or shoot me a PM. That's totally fine. And then after that, I'm going to be running a 6-week pregnancy program, and for 11 women, a pregnancy retreat in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales at the end of August, which is all going underway and birthing along beautifully. And it's just going to be super nourishing and delicious, and an honour to be able to hold. So that's what I'm up to.
So beautiful. So for our listeners, we'll have all of those links in the show notes. So please scroll on down to the show notes to be able to connect easily.
Yes. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Charmaine. To connect with you, Jules,
is julietanner.love, and you, Bridge?
bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
And if you're ready to ask, in what ways can I show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can I mine the wisdom from the experiences of my life and expand into those challenges? Then you're a soul-driven, heart-led mama who's ready for conversations and a community that supports her journey. Come join Soul Driven Motherhood. We'd love to have you.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.